Happy Wednesday, sweet friends.
It is snowing. So excited. Oh, I couldn't wait to get outside. Garu was excited to join me as well. Oh my God, it is so beautiful. I wanted to share it with you.
Garu and I absolutely love being in the woods by our house, and it's such a gift to be here. This little Decadent Pies palette is probably one of my favorites, and I love using the colors in this palette for different types of work, whether it be for portraits or for landscapes or abstracts of just about any kind. I find the colors in this palette to be so pretty together. And yeah, I just love it so much. One of the colors from this palette I've mentioned in many other videos. It's called Blackberry. It's the last one I added water to. And you can see that I actually have exhausted this color before, and I bought a new palette to replace that color. But yeah, I just love this palette, and I haven't used it in quite a while, so I thought it would be a great day for me to work on a little abstract landscape of sorts using this palette that I love so much. Since I'm not usually 100% sure where to start, it's often easiest for me to start by adding a light wash of color in my background. But today, after I started adding this light wash of the color, I kind of felt like I was going to be a little bit more daring and I was going to start adding some other colors. And most of these colors in this palette blend really well together, so it's really fun to play with them in this way. After adding my first wash of color, this is when I usually like to come in with my fine grain table salt. And since there's a little bit more pigment and water on this paper, I'll also come in with some coarser grain salt because they leave different textures and different marks, and I really like that. I find it's a great way to get a painting going, especially when I'm painting intuitively, because the marks that will be left by the salt often offer me inspiration for what I'll do next. Once the paper is completely dry, I like to come in with an old plastic card to scrape the salt off the painting. And I find doing this is better than using my fingers because, especially in the winter when I'm washing my hands a lot from painting, I get very dry hands and they can get really sore if I'm doing this kind of thing with my fingers. So the plastic card works great. And then I usually just keep the salt because, hey, why not? Then at this point, I start to build another color layer, and I do so looking at the different shapes that are already in the background. And I use this sort of as a guide as to where I want to add my colors. If I add just a very light wash of this green called key lime on top of the other colors without scrubbing my brush over the paper too much, it tends to just create like a light glaze over the surface and you can still see what's underneath it. And I really, really like that. This little palette was probably the second palette I bought when I first started working with watercolors. And I really liked the idea at the time of buying palettes such as this one because it sort of takes the guesswork out of the equation. The colors are already made to go well together, and it just makes it so much easier. And so I really loved working with this little palette. And even to this day, I still love working with it because the colors are really beautiful. And I love how they remain relatively bright even after they dry. I really love the marks left by the salt and the paint as they blended together in this area of the painting. So I'm wanting to sort of protect that area just below the squiggly line that I'm painting in right now, because I love those marks and I want to try and conserve them as much as possible. And so my painting or the background of my painting is sort of guiding me in this process. It's helping me make these decisions because I'm looking at what's in the paper already and I'm really letting my intuition speak to me and tell me what it is that I really love and what I either want to add to or what I maybe want to change. And so it's kind of as simple as that. It's just following your gut and going by what pleases your eye, I guess. And I love working this way. It is so freeing. And I don't have to make all the decisions because whatever I did before is sort of helping me in that process. And it's really making everything so much easier. So anyway, I love working this way. As you know, I work intuitively most of the time. I'd say probably all of the time because that's just how I love to work. I guess I don't love really coming in with a plan and usually when I do it's a pretty it's a very loose plan, let's just say. So I'm working on adding a different layer of color. I'm adding a little bit more pigment to the paper because I want to intensify the colors and keep building up this layer. But yeah, I'm really loving how these colors are blending together. This green called key lime works a little bit like a green gold. It's an interesting thing when you add this color next to another color, it tends to repel the other color a little bit, and so they blend together in a kind of neat way, and I really like that. So I'm just, working with the paints and I'm letting them do what they love to do, and that's helping me develop my composition. Now I've decided I want to work on adding one final layer of color, and this time I'm really going to focus the color I add because I'm trying to build my value contrast. And so I want to add a few more lines in the painting to make it a little bit more interesting to me. It's a little bit like it is looking interesting, but it's a little too centered. And I want to sort of help the eye move around the surface of the painting. And so I want to do that by adding some more lines, and I'll also add some darker colors to add some more value contrast. I'm loving the lines I've added, and at the same time, I'm finding that they're a little bit too defined. And so I'm coming in with my spray bottle and I'm just adding a little bit of water on the edges of those new lines that I created. And this is going to help to spread the paint a little bit and blur the lines so that they're not quite as stark. Um, that may take out something else that I really like, but I'm just going with the flow and letting what wants to happen happen because I'm trusting that what is gonna happen is gonna be the best thing for this painting as it's progressing. At this point, everything is dry, and I'm really loving what I've created in the background of my painting so far. And so I'm feeling ready to start moving on to working with my pens and markers and other tools to start adding some details and make this painting even more interesting. I wanted to add some dots next to the lines I've created, and I started doing so by using my Eco Twisby pen that's reloadable. Unfortunately, the ink that I use in that pen, depending on what color I'm adding it on top of, it sort of becomes more translucent than opaque, and I don't really want that for this painting right now. So I've decided to come in with my Posca paint marker, and I'm just adding some dots over the dots I had previously created. Normally, I don't like to work with my Posca markers over watercolor paper because the surface of the paper is very rough and that can wreak havoc on the tips of my markers. However, where I'm just dotting the paint onto the paper right now, I don't think that's going to be a big problem for my marker, and it is creating the effect that I wanted to create, which is more opaque dots. Now I'm feeling ready to start playing with my iridescent paints. And normally, as you know, I would love to start working with star gold, but in this case, there's quite a bit of yellow already in the painting, and so I feel like I need to tone down the yellow quite like a little bit at least. And so I've decided to go with another gold from my palette from Kramer Pigments, and I'll have the name of it down in the video description because I don't know it off the top of my head. But it's a little bit more toned down, and I feel like because there's already so much going on in the painting, I don't want the paint to kind of like jump at you. So I'm hoping that that's gonna work. We'll see how I feel about it after I've added the paint. I'm really loving the gold, and as I'm working on this area, I'm sort of feeling like those white lines are not sitting well with me anymore. And that sometimes will happen as I'm working along. The intuitive, creative process is like that. One minute you want to do something, and the next minute you want to try and figure out a way to cover it up and do something different. And that's what's going to happen. I'm going to take some of my Tropical Sunrise Magic Green, and I'm going to just paint over the white lines. I'm not going to worry about covering the dots, but the white lines themselves, for whatever reason, they're just not sitting well with me at this point. So I'm just going to cover them, and going to cover them with something that will be interesting next to that gold. And I think that Magic Green is exactly what those white lines need. I'll also add a few little splatters of this magic green to the rest of the painting, just so the magic green doesn't seem to stick out like a sore thumb, because if it's not anywhere else in the painting at this point, because there's so much of it with those lines, it might look a little awkward. So I'm adding a few little splatters of that. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking it would also probably be nice for me to add some splatters of the blackberry that I like so much. Before adding the little splatters of blackberry, however, it's important to let the other splatters dry. Otherwise, if they hit each other, they will blend, and I don't know that I'd really like what they would create. So anyway, I decided to dry the splatters of magic green before I put in my blackberry, and I actually prefer it like this. I think it's better for me. But you know, when you're painting your own painting, don't forget that you're always welcome to try anything you want to try, even if I don't do it. Please don't just do what I do. Experiment and play. It's so important in developing our own voice as artists to try and do different things than what we see other people do, because that really helps to create to develop our own voice and our own style of painting. And so I'd encourage you to experiment with these things. I experiment and play a lot in my process. And it's through that experimentation and play that I discover the things that I like and the things that I don't like. And so in this case, I decided to dry the magic green. Um, in another instance, I might have decided to do something different. Yay for intuitive painting. The messy edges of paint by on the border of the painting sometimes can be a little bit distracting, and it's oftentimes only by removing the tape that I actually know if I'm feeling like my painting is actually done. And sometimes I remove the tape and I think, nope, I need to add something else, and I will do that. In this case, as I'm removing the tape, I'm feeling like a big yes. I'm really loving how it turned out, and it's looking really, really cool. Um, yeah, it's like an abstract, a very abstract landscape of sorts, and I love it. Super happy with the decisions I made along the way. I don't know about you, but when I'm done with a painting process, I really love to stare at all the details in my little painting and ooh and all just looking at them. Oh, it's only when you pull your eyes a little bit closer to the painting that you notice some of the details. And when they all combine, they really create some cool effects. And I really enjoyed this little painting process, as you can probably tell. And I hope when you're painting your projects that you do the same. Step back and enjoy what you've created. It's really worth it. Thank you again for making the time to join me on my creative journey. I hope you have a wonderful week and happy creating!